Hi! We are going to continue our journey of studying mitosis as we wrap up the last part of this chapter. And we remember that this was an incredibly complex process that cell goes through during its lifetime. And because it is so complex, we have all these checkpoints where we are making sure that all the things that need to have been accomplished have been done before we move ahead. And what really fascinates me is that if you think that just a single cell cycle throughout its life is this complex, and if you think about how rarely mistakes are made in it, how amazing is it that we are made of some 37.2 to 70 trillion cells? These estimates vary a little bit because there is no way to account of all the factors that differ between us humans. But whether it is 37 plus or 70 trillion cells, that is a lot of cell cycles that we must have passed to reach that number. And the number of cell cycles would be much higher because we must constantly maintain that number. Some cells die off and they must be replaced. And there are injuries to the tissues that need to be fixed, and so on. But what I really find amazing of all this is that we start with just a single cell and end up being this organism made of an insanely large number of cells. And just by probability, you would expect that things go wrong much more often with this huge number of cell cycles that we must go through. But actually, that does not happen that often that it would go wrong. And why that does not happen is that we have these amazing regulatory mechanisms that constantly screen that everything is going the way it should. And if not, stop this process from going further and either try to fix it or send a signal to the cell that it is time for it to commit apoptosis. But every now and then something can go wrong. And that is the C word. Cancer is basically uncontrolled cell division because of an issue in the cell cycle regulation. And the reason why I want to mention this C word is that I know that many of you are thinking of going into clinical practice. And one thing that you will notice is that it is not just about being great at your job in a technical level, but really a lot of it is going to be about managing people and learning to work with people, and most importantly, communicating with people. From my own experience of years in clinical work, I can tell you that from the moment you mention the C word, that person will not hear anything you say afterwards. So it is really about how you present the information, because not all of your patients will have the same amount of knowledge on the same topic as you will have. And people get scared. And people are irrational at times. And that is normal. That is what makes us humans. So that just as a disclaimer based on experience that I wanted to share with you. So what this image tries to show is a schematic example of a development of a cancer. And we see that it starts as a simple mutation that took place during one of these cell cycles. But as these mutations accumulate, remember that this is just the likelihood that it will happen eventually. As we go through so many cycles, mistakes are bound to happen eventually. A cell may become able to start a tumor. And this tumor might keep developing and further mutations accumulate. This cancerous growth is still benign. It is contained on situ. And you see that then this tumorous tissue may now have gained an ability to become a type of that actually no longer just remains in one site, but starts to invade the underlying tissues. It has now become malignant, an invasive type of cancer. And for us, one of the worst outcomes is if it is able to enter the lymphatic system, which is basically a network of tubes that allow it to spread throughout the body. And if we reach this stage that the cancer is spreading, it really is usually quite a poor diagnosis. And this is why sometimes an invasive surgery to remove cancerous growth holds a risk, as we do not want to accidentally release these cells and let them spread throughout the body. So this is why we want to catch these mutated cells rather earlier than later. And there are cell cycle promoting proteins and tumor suppressing genes. And these kind of work in balancing each other out. And we do not want to flip this balance off too far. There are also many other causes for what may cause or contribute to cancer. And we can do some genetic testing to identify the likelihood of being more predisposed to certain types of cancer. But really, because I know that sometimes this part of the chapter might hit too close to the home for some students, I want to leave you to explore more of this part of the chapter independently. Your textbook does a good job of discussing the key points. I want to finish off by talking just briefly about some preventive actions that you can take. Many of these involve protective behavioral choices, avoiding smoking. In fact, smoking accounts for approximately 30% of all cancer-related deaths. Also, especially here in Arizona, where we are closer to the equator, extensive sun exposure is a major factor behind one of the most dangerous type of skin cancers, known as melanoma. There are also many other lifestyle choices to be aware of. For example, those who are heavy alcohol drinkers have an increased risk of certain cancers. In addition, I often get asked what to do regarding the diet. And although I am not going to give you medical advice here, I want to propose some things to consider. For example, excessive overweight might be a risk factor, and also consumption of large quantities of salt-cured and pickled foods may be an issue. But really, if you think about it, cancers are excessive growth of tissue, and the last thing you want to do is to give fuel for that growth. So simple sugars like highly processed sweet foods may be the last thing that you want to do. Instead, berries high in antioxidants and fruits and vegetables rich in vitamins A and C may be beneficial. And also cabbage has been found to be beneficial. And don't forget the role of our dietary fiber in keeping materials moving along the digestive tract. I think that this is it for now. And now that we are familiar with mitosis, which was our normal cell division, in the next chapter we will be talking about how the cell division of our sex cells differs from this.